Hello, hello.
Cooper, can you hear me?
I can, and boy, do you sound great.
The dulcet tones of the Scarlet 2i. With Lou Stagner here, I couldn't just use AirPods.
No.
I had to pull out the fancy microphone.
And here he is. Lou, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. See if we can get the video working. Here we go. All right. Welcome, everybody, to this special edition of Community Thursday, the community call. We had an awesome quiz house just a little bit ago with some great questions about Erie GC, the Genesis Scottish Open, and Lou Stagner here, our special guest. We're going to jump in and talk about some stats, some Arcos, some other great topics this evening, as well as any questions you in the audience want to ask. Really looking forward to it. But I do want to give a shout out to our spring Links Leagues winners first. First place was the one named Jake, came in with 94 points in 8 rounds. A really impressive showing. So round of applause here for the one named Jake taking solo first. And then we had a 3-way tie for second place with Will Plays Golf, JP Curls, and Sean, all coming in with 93 points. Really impressive showings there for the Spring League. And I'm excited to announce the Summer League is open now. So you can go post your scores dating back to July 2nd, Mr. Senor. Is that where we're at?
Yes, sir.
Sweet. So go post your scores for Links Leagues. The Summer League is open. We've got some massive Links points totals prizes for first, second, and third place. Tons of Pro Shop credit on the line. And of course, you get points just for posting your scores. I want to kick it off and kind of go around the horn here this evening. Who are your favorites for the Genesis Scottish Open? I mean, we saw a really exciting day one here, and I'll kick it over to Lou. You first. What do you think about the Scottish Open?
JT's played pretty well today. 62, 8 under, solid start. So he's turned it around from where he was at this point last year. If you remember, we were wondering whether or not he should be on the Ryder Cup. He was not in great form going into it, but he seems to have righted the ship and is playing well. So he should be tough to beat.
Data Golf would agree with you. He's sitting now at a 13.3% projected.
Yeah, he's playing well now. We'll see how it ends up.
How about Chris?
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I always like going for at least the relative hometown guys. So maybe Tommy Fleetwood or Bobby McIntyre. Those are my picks going in. Did okay on Thursday, so I'll stick with that.
I'm gonna go with Ludwig. 10% chance of winning based on Data Golf right now, and my hot take is that Justin Thomas won't even be the first Justin on the leaderboard. That Justin Lower will actually edge him out by Sunday.
Wow. Some bold takes. That's great. Really excited about that. You can tune into the watch party. We have the time difference here, but we'll be chatting about it and watching it here in the Discord. We're 1 week out from the last major of the year, so I'd be remiss to not ask, if Lou, with your experience with data, your interactions with the pros, do you have any favorites for the Open coming up?
I have some personal favorites that I'd like to see do well. I've been a huge Victor Hovland fan for the last few years, and it's nice to see he was not playing all that well earlier this year, but he seems to have turned it around a bit. I'd love to see Victor do well and contend and be in the mix. I'd like to see Rory play well. I enjoy watching his style of golf, so he should be fun to watch. And I hope the golf course wins. I really enjoy. I'd love to see the wind blow and it raining sideways at that event and that event only. It's great to wake up, make a nice breakfast every morning here on the East Coast, have some coffee and watch some golf every morning. That's probably my favorite event to watch because you wake up early and you kind of do the breakfast thing. So I really enjoy that part of it. And I hope the conditions are just absolutely brutal. It makes it a little bit more enjoyable for me.
Do
Do you think I've heard that most people say just because of the weather, it's not going to be as firm as we probably all would want. Do you think that favors anyone in your mind? Like it not being a true true test.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it gets real bouncy and real firm, you have to have a little better control of the golf ball in a number of different respects. Approach shots around the green. It also can tend on some of those courses that have a lot of contours on them. It can introduce a bit more luck when it gets really firm because you don't have to be off by much. I mean, your tolerances are so small and you can just be off the wrong way a couple of times and it can lead to some really bad outcomes. So when it gets really firm like that, I think the luck factor increases a bit. And you could see some people that may not contend in soft benign conditions that might contend in those kind of conditions if they get a series of fortunate breaks. I like all types of golf over there. So I think they do a pretty good job of identifying pretty solid champions. And I'm curious to see how Bryson does. Like he's playing really well and obviously won earlier this year. I'm really curious to see how he does over there, but it's going to be fun. I'm going to be up at the crack of dawn every morning and watching as much of it as I possibly can.
Awesome. Mr. Senor.
I was just gonna say same. Wait, I mean, as far as my heart says Rory. I want Rory to win so bad. There was a part I think on probably Saturday where I flipped from rooting for Rory to rooting for Bryson at the U.S. Open. I'm just gonna pick Rory from the beginning and root for him the whole time and not waver because I really want to see him win. Do I think he'll win? I don't really care. I think it's just like a heart-based choice, and I just really want him to win. So I'm not gonna think about it. I'm just gonna roll with it.
Nice. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to say Rory. He's come so close so many times recently, especially doing it at the Open. So that would be huge. I'll run back Tommy again. Kind of similar thing. He's been so close so many times, and again, doing it in the UK would be pretty cool to see. I feel like both of their games should line up pretty well, depending on the conditions, maybe. But yeah, those would be my two favorites. But I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting regardless. You have both of them, obviously Bryson, obviously Scotty. There's a lot of good storylines and some good potential leaderboards that we could see. So hopefully it all plays out well.
Yeah, looking forward to all of the golf in the Isles coming up here. But I want to kick it over and bring the focus back to you, Lou. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here with the Links community. Will you give us a little bit of a background? Where are you from? What's your experience with golf been like so far?
Sure. I'll try to be brief on this one. Originally from Buffalo, New York, which unfortunately makes me a Buffalo Bills fan. Not a whole lot to root for there overall. I see some shaking up and down, so looks like another Bills fan in the house. I started playing golf many years ago. Originally started playing left-handed and tore ACL in my right knee and switched over to right-handed except for putting and been a golf junkie ever since. I've been a numbers guy for as long as I can remember. Went to school for math and computer science and have been working in analytics since before they called it analytics. And started putting out some content around golf analytics. I originally started a blog on golf analytics 6 years ago, a little over 6 years ago now. And I never intended it to really go anywhere. I thought a few people might read it. And I started to cross post some content on social media, and it really started to take off. And then it's just led me in a million different directions ever since, and it's been a really fun and enjoyable ride. And getting to combine two things that I really am passionate about, numbers and golf, is really just a kind of a utopia for me. And absolutely love getting to do some of the things that I get to do.
That's awesome. That's really great. And that kind of answers one of my follow-up questions of how you got into, the data side of things. Really cool that you can combine those passions. I saw you unmute, Mr. Senor.
My first follow-up is Go Bills.
Yeah,
Big,
nice. There you
big
go.
Bills fan. I was born in Buffalo. Uh, what would you have done otherwise? You know what I mean? Like, what was your alternative?
What do you mean? What was my alternative?
So you've taken this route, right? And
Right.
it sounds like it sort of started as a hobby and it turned into something bigger than that. You didn't
Yeah.
initially know. If it hadn't worked out, what would you have done? Like, if you had to, like,
I
if
mean,
there
I'm
was,
still doing it. Like, I still have a day job in corporate America. I'm director of analytics at a very large company, based in the Northeast, and still do that. In golf, I have a lot of part-time jobs in golf at the moment, and it's a big part of what I do and how I spend my time. I don't watch much TV. Like, I'm not caught up on any shows. At night, a lot of people, will flip on Netflix or whatever it is and chill out and watch some TV, and I'm flipping open the laptop and working on golf stuff. So I spend a lot of free time doing that, and eventually, I think this, could become a full-time thing for me. But right now, it's a great blend of getting to do the things that I do in golf, and still, have my day job, which I enjoy doing. I do, everything from simple reporting to machine learning, AI, and everything in between at the day job. And I get to do a lot of the same type of stuff in golf, and it's just, it's an amazing blend of both worlds for me.
great. It's a nice handshake.
Yeah, definitely. And I never applied. I probably would have pursued this a little bit differently if I started this with the intention of turning it into a business. Like, it's turned into a business, and I never had any intention of this turning into a business. It was never an initial goal. It was never an initial objective. It just sort of accidentally happened. And I've been relatively, serious about it, as of late, but I spent a long time not being incredibly serious about, actually growing a business and turning it into something. And if I had that objective from the beginning, I probably would be in a different spot right now. But, I've just very slowly and organically kind of grown what I'm doing in the golf space and just letting it continue to naturally grow. And at some point there will be a tipping point. There will be a breaking point at some point. And when that happens, that's awesome. Can't wait.
How did that happen kind of in practice? So you had a blog, I assume, started being more active on Twitter, posting, insights you see or whatever. Like, is that kind of how it started and then snowballed and then your audience grew and so on, or were there other
Yeah.
aspects to it?
No, that's exactly right. So I started a blog, and the very first podcast that I did was a guy named Will Haskett. He used to have a golf podcast called The Perfect Number, and it was a podcast that I listened to. And it's really because of him that I got into this, not because of him directly, but it was a podcast really focused on golf stats. And I found it, and it was great. It was awesome. Will is a sports announcer. He works on PGA Tour Radio. If you've ever listened to PGA Tour Radio, I guarantee you've heard him a million times, and he announces other sports as well. Great guy, and his podcast was fantastic. And he was talking to some folks about clutch factor, how people perform in clutch situations. And I had access to PGA Tour data at that time through some other avenues, and I thought, well, that's really an interesting question. That's an interesting topic. Like, I think I can answer that. I think I have a way with, some of the things I've looked at. I think I have a way that I could figure that out and answer that. And I went and started to do some work and went, oh yeah, I definitely have some really interesting things here. Like, what am I going to do with it? And I decided I was going to start that blog. And so I, told my wife one day, I'm going to start this blog on golf analytics. And, I've told this story before, and, her initial response is, "You're so much fun at parties." And so I started it up and ended up connecting with Will Haskett. I had kind of found him on Twitter and said, "Hey, like, remember that podcast you did on this topic? Like, I built this tool and found these, things, and And by that time, I had, put some other things out that I had worked on. And he invited me on the podcast and did a segment. And this was, like a month or so after I had started. And then, continued to put stuff on social media. And I was not a social media person at all. And, to the point where, like, I still am not a fan of social media. It's become part of, what I do and how I share information. But prior to getting into, posting things on Twitter, didn't use social media. I had a Facebook account. I'd go on it once a year, just one of those guys that just never really used it. And when I first started my blog, my one friend said, "You need to start sharing some of this stuff on Twitter." And that really kind of was the genesis of me really getting into sharing a bunch of stuff on Twitter. And then some people saw it and started to engage. And then, I went from 100 followers to, 1,000 to 2,000 to, before I knew it, I had 10,000 followers, and then just kept putting out content and just kept attracting new followers. And it's grown to wherever it is now. And it's, it's still hard for me to believe that I went from, legitimately like 2 or 3 followers to where I am right now in 5 or 6 years, just by sharing like nerdy golf math stuff. Like, it's just such a thing that you would think absolutely nobody would be interested in. But there's a lot of people that are kind of interested in the numbers around golf, especially as it relates to them in their game.
Yeah, for sure. I want to jump to another question I was going to ask you later. You mentioned not being a big social media guy, but you've seen some incredible growth on Twitter. What are some positives and negatives of that? One of my favorite parts of your content are the statistics deniers jumping into your DMs. Did you have any recent great DMs or fun experiences, maybe some positives that have come out of that you want to share?
I have met, like, everything that I do in golf right now is because of social media. Like, so every opportunity, every single door that's opened is directly because of what I've done on social media. So many positives. I've met so many unbelievable people because of social media, and these are now some lifelong friends that I have. So I've gotten to be really good friends with, a number of people, including Mark Crossfield and Greg Chalmers. I do a podcast with them, Hack It Out Golf Podcast, if you're looking for one to add to your to your playlist. And they've become great friends, and I've met many other fantastic people through the years that are now really close friends of mine. And none of that would have happened if not for social media. And there's definitely some some dark sides to social media. There's some people out there that are pretty challenging at times. And it used to bother me a lot more, like early on, like to the point where I would, get some, I've gotten some really nasty messages through the years and some really creepy stuff too, just to be blunt. And it used to really bother me to the point where, like, it would impact my day. It'd impact, I would close Twitter down and it would impact my life outside of Twitter. And then, I eventually got to the point where I realized, like, this is just, some miserable idiot in their mom's basement, maybe. And they're just, they're just miserable, and they're just expelling this misery to other people. And, like, whatever they say has no impact on my life in any way whatsoever. But there's definitely a dark side to social media. And if you can't get to the point where you can kind of look past that and ignore that, like, there's people that are really impacted by the nastiness. And I've had some, I post some of the funny ones that kind of crack me up, but I've had some really, really, like, nasty stuff that happens. It's, so social media can be a cesspool. And I think that's why I ignored it in the first place. Like, just because it's just lots of people out there just looking to kind of cause trouble and be jerks, and that's why I avoided it. But I'm glad that I wasn't hardlined on that stance, because now, like, I have dozens of really good friends and people that I've met all because of being part of this cesspool.
Yeah, I definitely understand and relate to that take. I think we have an awesome community of golfers here together. I mean, Chris, Greg here up on stage, a lot of the folks in the audience, we've gotten to play golf together. We've gotten to meet up in person, go to events, bought a golf course in Scotland together because of the connections on the internet. There have been some really beautiful and awesome things that have come out of it. But you're absolutely right that trolls are an intrinsic part of the internet, and some of them are definitely nastier than others. So you have to kind of take the good with the bad.
Definitely.
And have that positive outweigh the negative there. Chris, that's how you unmute.
Yeah, I was curious, Lou. I kind of gather from the screenshots you post and everything that a lot of that. Well, I don't know where some of the nasty stuff comes from, but a lot of the like anger or disbelief comes from kind of people, kind of the stats not matching the eye test or the stats not matching the intuition. Or everyone feeling like they drive at 300 yards, but they really don't. All those types of things. But so I'm curious, like. Well, is there anything that like maybe has matched the eye test over the years, like perhaps surprised you, like is different than you thought before you dove into the data? Or, maybe perhaps what are the biggest things that like really trip people up? Like, people have real trouble getting their head around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll start with, some things that surprised me. Like one of the early things that I did was looking at the angle that you had to the pin, right? So having the good angle, how much of an impact does it make? And I, grew up playing the game, being told, if the pin is on the right, you want to hit it up the left side of the fairway so you have the better angle. And when you have the better angle, you should be more aggressive. And when you have the worse angle, you should be more conservative. Because I grew up hearing that advice. And one of the very first things that I did was I looked at that. And I assumed that that's what it was going to show. I assumed it was going to show there's a big advantage for having a quote unquote better angle to the pin. And I was really, really surprised when that wasn't the case. And so one of the first things I looked at, the very first thing that I looked at beyond the clutch factor one that I mentioned was that. And that was, kind of shocking. And that, I think, really opened my eyes up to like, hold on a minute, like you shouldn't make any assumptions about any of these things and kind of let don't go into any of these with preconceived notions of what you think is going to happen. Just kind of let the numbers talk for themselves, and which is what I do in my day job. Is the numbers are what the numbers are, and you certainly have the opportunities to kind of twist and shape those. If you're being kind of disingenuous about things, but like I try to, here are the numbers, and if I've done something wrong with the analysis, like I'm happy to have someone talk to me about that and show me what's wrong, and because I'm trying to get to the correct answer, not trying to get to what I think the answer should be. So that was one of the early ones. There's been a few others that I've come across. It's interesting to see that tour pros struggle a little bit more with straight putts than they do with slightly breaking putts. And that's another one where I was really kind of surprised to see. And I think what ends up happening there is, and I've had a few tour pros kind of say the same thing, is it's not too often, when you're in that 6 foot range, 5 foot range, it's not too often that you have a putt that's really, really straight. There's always some movement. And if it's actually really, really straight, people are oftentimes trying to find movement in that putt. And so they'll overread in those situations, and they'll have some misses because it was actually dead straight. And when you have a putt that's on a relatively gentle slope, say 1%, not something on a side hill, but 1%, it's really easy for a tour pro to see that. They know exactly which way it's going. Now it's just kind of matching pace and start line that they pick, but they know it's going. There's no question, like, is this going to wiggle left? Is it going to wiggle right? They know exactly which way it's going, and those have a little bit higher make rate. So that's another one that was really, really interesting to me, was that. And I remember one of the first times I talked about that, it was on Michael Breed's radio show. And after I hung up, Fred Funk called in, and Fred Funk kind of went on and on for like 15 minutes about like the putt that he wanted the least, like in any situation. I think he even said, like, if there's a major on the line, like, I do not want a dead straight 6-footer. If there's a major on the line, I want something with a little bit of break so I know exactly which way it's going and I'm not guessing which way it's gonna, which way it might wobble if I don't see a break. So it's another one that kind of surprised me. I guess with respect to, people not believing the numbers, I think we all can be very guilty of our own confirmation bias, our own biases about what we think, and we kind of feed that narrative. And when some data comes that disagrees with what we think is actually going on, what we think is actually happening, I think sometimes people, and I get it, I totally understand, because I'm probably guilty of this too. We take that, we're offended by that in a bit because we have to admit that we've been wrong about something for a long period of time. And I get how that feels, and I think that's where a lot of the pushback comes from. It's like, no, that's not how it is. Like I've thought it's been this for years, and this is what I see on the golf course. This is what I see when I play with my friends. It's what I see with my own game. But again, they're kind of feeding what they think is happening, and they're only affirming that when that thing happens, and they kind of ignore when something different happens or when that doesn't happen. And again, as humans, we're just all guilty of that, not just in golf, but in a lot of things. So I think that's why sometimes people get a little wrapped around the axle when the data doesn't necessarily agree with what they thought. And at times, I used to. I used to try to engage and have conversations with some of those folks in DMs to try to explain to them, like, what I was looking at, how I was looking at it, what the numbers mean. And I found out pretty quickly that was kind of a waste of time to do those things. So now, every once in a while when I get those, and I still get them, I just take a screenshot and post it. And I never post who the person is. Like, I don't want, I'm not trying to I don't want to sick like the internet on somebody because they, sent me a nasty gram in DMs. So I don't reveal who it is, but I post it and I laugh at it. And it truly, some of them are hysterical, and they do just make me wonder what's going on with some folks sometimes.
That's great. I wanted to ask, so those cognitive disconnects that you see in the data, and you mentioned having access to PGA Tour data. You work with Arcos. Arcos is one of our favorite partners here as a community. It's one of our favorite things is to screenshot our club stats and
Nice.
various holes that we played really well. What's it like working with that data set? Is that the largest data set for like amateur and pro players in any sport, right? Like, it must be just an absolutely incredible you know opportunity to work with that as a statistician, as an analyst.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely very, very cool to have access to all of that data. So having access to ShotLink data and having access to Arcos is really cool. They're both respect the largest data set in their respective areas. So ShotLink is the biggest database for PGA or for professional golf stats. Maybe 28, 29 million shots in ShotLink right now, somewhere in that neighborhood, creeping up on 30 million maybe. And to put that in perspective, Arcos is creeping up on 1 billion shots, 1 billion with a B, billion. And so Arcos has more than 30 times the amount of data that the PGA Tour has with ShotLink. And, they've been using ShotLink since 2004, like some early prototypes in like 2003 and 2002. But, in earnest since 2004, and Arcos is about ready to pass 1 billion shots. And, having access to that is amazing. I remember the first day that I worked at Arcos, and the gentleman who is in charge of all engineering and software development for Arcos was kind of giving me the lay of the land and showing me the database and the tables and where everything was. And he's like, all right, like, I want to show you, how I would go about getting some data. So tell me like something that you'd want to look at, and we'll go look at some shots. And I went, all right, I want 0 to 5 handicap players, and I want them from 140 to 150 yards in the fairway, and like I want to know what their average proximity to the hole was. And he's like, all right. He's like, I'm just going to limit this to like last weekend. So I'm only going to look at shots from last weekend. And he runs the numbers. He's showing me all the tables, and it comes back. And I forget exactly how many there were, but there were like 1,200 shots that met this criteria. And like my eyes just popped out of my head. Like I thought there was going to be like 3, like for one weekend, and there were 1,200 shots that met this criteria, really specific criteria. So like the sample sizes are so unbelievably massive in Arcos. Like when I want to find out something about, any handicap, what it doesn't matter, 10 index, 20 index, 15 index, whatever I want to look at, the samples are so huge that you can be, so, confident in the numbers that you're looking at because our samples are just so massive. And having access to that, like as a numbers nerd and being able to play with that is just like it's literal kid in a candy store. It's so much fun to get to play around and look at that stuff.
So that being said, which of those statistics have had an impact on your game personally? Like when if after you look up one of those things for shots from last week, how does that affect when you go out on the course yourself? And is that all running through your head as you're selecting your club when you're about to walk up to the tee? Like, how does that affect you day to day on the golf course?
Yeah, I mean, some of the personal impacts for me, like some of the things I've looked at that have had a huge impact on choices that I make. Like Texas wedge is probably a really good example. And if you're off the green, even if you're 30 feet, 35 feet off the green, and you have like a 70-foot, shot putt in front of you, you're typically better off with your putter in most situations. Now, if you're at one of these courses where there's, 15 feet of elevation change between where you are and the level of the green, like that's a different story. But if it's relatively reasonable, like you need a pretty good reason to not try to hit putter because, we talked about earlier some of the myths that are, maybe true or not true. I'm sure you've all heard and you've probably said that your worst putt is going to be better than your worst chip. That's actually true. That is definitely true. And your best putt is going to be better than your best chip as well. And so that's something that I definitely have moved towards in my own game. In a lot of those situations, I used to bump and run with wedges, 9 irons, things like that. I used to put a wedge in my hand and hit those shots, and now I am putter. Like you almost have to wrestle it away from me for me to not hit putter from well off the green. And it's definitely helped that part of my short game. It's tightened it up a little bit, and every little bit matters. So when you're trying to get better, it's very challenging to get better, a huge chunk of shots at one time. And so you're going to kind of peel away at that onion, fractions of a shot here and there, and all of these little things they add up to, they add up to big decisions they add up to big numbers and really help to reduce your overall score by kind of combining all of these things. And that's the other thing too that is really important that I talk about a lot is you need to know your own stats. You need to know your own numbers. You shouldn't be guessing at that because people are not good at guessing at what their numbers are and what they're good at and what they're bad at. And the story that I've told a bunch of times is my podcast co-host, Greg Chalmers. So Greg he's 480 starts or so on the PGA Tour. He's now a Champions Tour guy out there kind of grinding it. And he's literally one of the best 3 to 4 putters in the ShotLink era, which makes him, one of the best 5 to 10 putters in the history of the game of golf. And he told a story. This was, years ago. He told a story where, his game was kind of in a funk, and he was blaming his putting. He thought his putting was just so off the rails, and he needed to work on his putting, and it wasn't where he wanted it to be. and his coach, and at the time, Greg was not really into looking at stats, didn't look at his own stats, it wasn't a part of what he did. And that was really common, years ago. Not a lot of players were really into the numbers. And Greg just didn't look and didn't pay attention. And he told his coach, like, no, we're not working on any of this other stuff. We got to work on putting. We got to fix my putting. And his coach said, Greg, you are ranked second on the PGA Tour in strokes gained putting. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're putting unbelievably well. And what probably ended up happening, and we talked about this, was he couldn't put an exact finger on it, but he said, I probably missed an 8-footer to not make the cut on a Friday afternoon, and maybe I missed another putt at kind of a crucial time, and instantly in his mind that just kind of flipped the switch of, oh, like, I'm not a good putter. Like, I had to make that 8-footer to make the cut. I missed it. I'm not a good putter. And that kind of got buried in his mindset. And he kind of ran with that for a while. And then he said his eyes were really opened up when his coach told him that he was ranked second in strokes gained putting. And he realized, oh, hey, wait a minute. Like, that's not the issue. There's other things going on. And that trickles down to all of us as well. We're all trying to get better. So knowing where you are, knowing what things you need to work on are really important, because there can be a huge skill gap between people with the same handicap. The example that I give all the time is around 10 handicaps. So I'm going to quiz somebody. Cooper, I'm going to quiz you. So let's say you and I are both 10 handicaps. We're both standing on the first tee. And we say, all right, I'm a 10, you're a 10, I'm a 10, no strokes. We're playing this straight up. Let's go, $10 aside. But you happen to be in the top 5% of putters for 10 handicaps. Like, you're one of the best putting 10 handicaps around. I'm one of the worst putting 10 handicaps around. I'm in the bottom 5%. How many shots per round of skill difference is there between us in putting?
Ooh, top 5%, bottom 5%?
Yep.
That's, oh boy. I'm going to say 7 strokes.
6. It's the best guess I've ever gotten on that question. So you did literally. I've asked it to a lot of people. It's the best guess ever. Most people say 2, 2.5, 3. That's really typical. It's about 6 shots. So
That's
me it's a lot. Me as the worst putting 10 handicap, like in the bottom 5%, if we could wave a magic wand and make me just about the average putting 10 handicap, like, I would go from a 10 down to a 7. If we could turn me into you, like if we could make me like you, putt like you, I would go from a 10 to a 4. So I'm hitting the ball, striking the ball like a 4, but I'm putting like a 22 handicap. Like, and it kind of makes me a 10. So knowing your numbers helps you focus where you should focus. So you can, that's typically going to be, if you have a real glaring weakness, or a substantial weakness, working on that is going to help you lower your scores a lot faster. And that's just one of the benefits of what's opened my eyes as I use the data and look at it, not for myself but for others, is understanding all that info.
Yeah, I think that just to like double click on that from my own experience is that, and this is probably confirmation bias, but what you described about that putting is exactly what Arcos, like using Arcos, taught me. Is that for the longest time, like, I'd hit a really wipey slice off the tee, and I'd be like, man, I just got to get out in the range and just hit 100 drives until I straighten it out. And the second I started seeing Arcos and knowing what my handicap goal was, I started realizing that I'm actually more accurate and longer than my handicap target is off the tee, but my approach game is dog shit. And so it's like that, a lot of that, then it's like, all right, well, now I just need to get better in irons. Like that, if I can straighten that out, then that's going to make a meaningful difference in my progression in the game. And there's absolutely no way that I would have noticed that had I not had that data at my fingertips. And, it's something you see that the pros have, but like having it in your pocket is really remarkable.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
We're not there yet, but like the plan is there. The awareness.
It's a journey for all of us, so we're all in the same boat there.
Yeah, remarkable how impactful that can be if you're really struggling in one particular area, right? Versus that's shocking. I know I guessed high, but to hear it put in those terms of fix that one area if you're in the bottom quartile, right? It can really make a huge impact on your handicap and on your performance. That's
Yeah,
all.
absolutely. At every level, from professionals to 30 handicaps and everybody in between. Absolutely, we use stats pretty heavily. I'm the assistant coach for the Princeton men's golf team, and we use stats really heavily, and we use that to to drive our practice, and what players are working on and how they're working on it, and what they're how they're playing out on the course, and what's working and what's not working. And it definitely makes an impact for the team. We're ranked the highest we've ever been. Like last season, we were, for a blip there, we were like 68th in the country. It's the highest the Princeton men's team has ever been in modern times. And I'm not saying it's all because we track our stats, and we're leveraging that to help the players get better, but it plays a part, and it's just one of the things that we do, to help players improve and get better, and that's just a piece of the puzzle. So I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch. I think Arcos is great. I'm affiliated with them. At the end of the day, if I was coaching you and I was helping you, I wouldn't care if you did this on the back of the napkin. Like, I would want you to get strokes gained information, even if you're doing it manually, because that's really going to help you improve. Now, it'd be great if you bought Arcos, but if you're going to just do it on on scratch paper in a notebook, like, you need this information to help you improve. And I don't care if you're a 20 handicap or you're a tour pro. There's a lot of valuable info there.
Yeah, we're big fans here. I tell everybody that I play with that you don't have it, right? It's free with your Links membership, to get the sensors, and it's
Awesome.
definitely been an awesome impact, right? They're a great partner for us. I want to turn it over, Chris. Talk a little bit about what we're doing with your next question you listed.
Yeah, I was, and you got me thinking about this as well, Lou, with the comment about your first kind of insight about playing the angles and it not being as important as you originally thought or as you were taught. But uh, part of what we do here is buy golf courses, or evaluate golf courses that we may purchase. We purchased a course in Scotland, and we're doing renovations and so on and so forth. So I have a few questions coming out of this, I'd say, but a lot of the analytics I see you post, Lou, are more kind of player focused, right? Like, okay, for a person in this handicap range or hitting this type of shot, what are the observations? I'm curious what maybe course specific, or kind of course attribute analyses you may have done, like certain types of courses, how that impacts people's game, or how that impacts how you play. And also, I mean, for us, right? Like, is there anything we should be thinking about? Like, well, what attributes make something, uh, you know, more playable for high and low handicappers, or actually more challenging, or can be challenging for high to low handicappers, or so on and so forth. Like, anything up from a course perspective, I'm really curious to get your perspective on.
Yeah, I've done some work with a few different architects. So I've had architects reach out to me, whether it be during renovations or being new construction. And there's some architects out there that are extremely passionate about the numbers and the data, and understanding what different changes are going to mean to a specific hole, or if it's a new construction, like what does it mean if I do this, if I put this hazard here, if I let this tree stay here, if I make the fairway this wide, if I make it this narrow, what does that mean? How is it going to change scoring? So there's some architects out there that are really embracing trying to understand actual, like, expected shots to hole out in different situations, and how that changes based on how you construct a golf hole and what you do to it. And it's to me, there's so many golf holes that you play from a statistics standpoint, where it's just it's so completely obvious, like, what you need to do as a player. Like, it's just blatantly obvious. Just think of a really simple, easy straightaway hole that's 400 yards long, and the fairway is 30 yards wide, and there's no real trouble on either side, and there's no bunkers, and the rough isn't it isn't thick to worry about. Like, you're hitting driver. Like, you're going to hit it down there as far as you can, and your target is the middle of the fairway, and you're going to try to hit as many balls as far as you can in the fairway that you can. Like, that's just, there's no deciding what to do in those situations. And to me, the most interesting holes are when you have decisions that are really, really close to the same kind of expected score. Like, those are the most interesting holes, and those are like when I'm working with a player to design a plan. And let's just stick with like tee shots for a second. When we're trying to design a plan around tee shots and what targets players should be selecting on a given hole, when you come to those holes where it's not obvious whether it's a driver, a 3-wood, or an iron, like, those are my favorite holes, because you really have to figure out, for you in that day, in that specific situation, what the right call is. When it's completely 100% obvious what club you're going to hit and where you're going to hit it to, like, those are not as interesting to me. A lot of people think that I'm like anti-golf course architecture, but I'm not by any stretch. I like the really interesting holes that really not just give you options, but give you options that are relatively close to the same score. Like, the same, if you played this hole a million times with a driver, a million times with a 3-wood, a million times with an iron, it's about the same average score every time you play it. Those are the ones that are super interesting to me. And it's really cool to see that there's some architects out there that are, really kind of embracing that and trying to understand that. And they're moving away from I don't want to say they're moving away from the artistic side of it, because I don't want to make it sound like they're taking creativity and art out of what they do, because I think that's a big component of it. But they're really trying to, instead of just saying, well, I'm going to put this centerline bunker here and it's going to have this impact, or like, I'm going to really tempt players. I'm going to make it way more enticing for them to like hug the left side so they have a better approach angle, but there's OB on the left. Like, those, those myths of days gone by, like, we understand the game at a much deeper level now. And there are architects out there that are embracing that so that they can incorporate that into their design. And so I think you'll continue to see new courses and renovations. We're not building new courses at the same rate that we did 25 years ago. There's still some new ones going up. There's a lot of renovations that happen, and I think you'll continue to see more architects trying to understand how their changes are actually going to impact scoring, and then try to make changes that give multiple options of about the same score, because those are clearly the most interesting.
And I'm curious to get more examples of that, because it's, I guess, intuitively, like, saying angles don't matter means it kind of narrows the choices you should have to make, right? Like, you no longer care about being right side, left side, because the angle doesn't matter, so on. But what you're describing there is, well, there are real decisions that you can make to try and balance the shot values and make interesting decisions. So, like, what other tools or aspects of a course do you see, or maybe you hear architects asking about or utilizing to try and like draw that out in the modern game?
Well, I think one, at least some of the architects I've talked to that I've connected with, they realize that, part of when I say angles don't matter, part of that, that's not a completely, I don't want to say it's completely accurate, but that's not a full, that's a little soundbite. Sometimes angles do matter. They don't matter that often. Sometimes they do a bit. They matter the closer you get, and the closer you get to the hole, certainly the more they matter. And really, they matter from the aspect of how much green there is to work with. And the more green you have to work with, the easier the shot's going to be. The less green you have to work with, the tougher the shot's going to be. Like, when you start to get out, further away from the hole, like 60 yards, 70 yards, 80 yards, you get out past that, it just doesn't really matter, and you're just better off being in the fairway than you are being in the rough. And so the complete way to say that angles don't matter is, angles typically don't matter like as you get further away from the hole. Sometimes they do matter, but chasing that angle typically means you're going to have to pick a target that's closer to trouble. And when you're picking a target that's closer to trouble, you are negating any benefit that you're going to get from that angle, because there's going to be, if you're consistently doing that, like you can't think of this in terms of only one shot. Like if I flip a coin one time and it comes up heads, does that mean forevermore it's going to come up heads? No, it's a 50-50 shot every time I flip that coin. And so you have to think of it in terms of a lot of outcomes. If I did this a lot, what's going to happen overall, not just, oh, I did it this time and it worked and I'm going to do it this way always, or I did it this time and it didn't work and I'm never going to do this again. So like when you're chasing those angles and you're putting yourself into a position where that trouble comes more into play, you're just going to, like, if you're doing that all the time, you're just going to negate any benefit you get from that angle. But being in the fairway is, in almost every situation, more important than having a better angle. A great angle from the rough, if you're 150 yards out, 100 yards out, a great angle from the rough is not as good as a bad angle from the fairway. Because rough brings in so many variables of, quality of lie, how much can you spin it, how much can you control how you're going to flight it. All of those things have a big impact on where the ball ends up, which is why, just thinking of it in terms of a really simple stat, greens in regulation goes down so much when you get in the rough, because there's lots of variables that make it tougher to hit out of the rough. So, getting in the fairway is far more important than having a good angle. Now, in situations where it does help a little bit, like, when things start to get firmer, it's, depending on how you flight the ball, you can certainly end up in some more advantageous situations, but it's not doesn't happen often. And the reality is we're just not good enough to consistently get that good angle, right? We're just not good enough. We hit it into a huge area, like with every club in the bag if you're an amateur, and you're just not precise enough to go, like, I'm going to take it up the left side here. Like, no, you're probably not, like, because you hit it into a massive area, and some of them might end up on the left side, but you're going to miss a whole lot more way left. You're going to miss some way right. So, we have these huge areas we hit the ball into, so it's very hard to be precise when we're just not precise, and that's true at basically every skill level.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I have maybe one course related question for you, a little bit of a tangent, but it has, I've just been wondering this a lot recently. I'm sure you have the data for it. So I'm very curious as to how good of a job slope and rating actually do in quantifying what they're supposed to do, which to me, I guess, seems like a little bit of an eye test versus data. Like you would have the data on how different handicaps actually score at all the courses versus, a bunch of USGA raters like actually like viewing the course and trying to, do their best to judge it in those factors. But I'm curious how that plays out in practice. Have you ever looked at that?
I have. I've kind of written some things about it. I've looked at that, and I would say overall, they do a pretty good job with a very, very complex topic, and it's a really hard problem to solve. And the one thing that slope and rating is never going to solve for is just sandbaggers, right? There's people that are intentionally cheating. It's not a large percentage of people, but they're definitely just typing numbers in and they're making their index whatever they want it to be, or they're intentionally missing putts and things like that. So they're never going to be able to truly effectively overcome that. That's still going to be a problem. It's always been a small problem, and it'll always continue to be a small problem. And one of the things I've written about, like if you are prepping for a member guest, let's say, and you want to have your handicap, if you want to have your handicap go up for your member guest legally, without you doing anything funny to change it, just play the most forward tees at your course. Playing the most forward tees at your course, your handicap's probably going to go up a little bit. If you want your handicap to go down a little bit, play the back tees. Your handicap's probably going to go down a little bit. Now, is this true in every case? Like if you play at a course where, you know, the back tees have a bunch of, you know, 250-yard forced carries and you only carry the ball 230, like that's a problem. Not a lot of places have that, but if that's your course, then, you know, this doesn't hold true. But I think what's going on there is it's not that the rating system is necessarily faulty there. I think what happens a lot is, and you may think about this in terms of the courses you play at regularly, and in some of the data that I've looked at around this, it's more than likely that the back tees are going to have more holes well forward. Like they move tee boxes up from the back tees. Like you're not, if the course is, you know, if your blue tees are 6,700 yards, it's probably playing way shorter than 6,700 at a lot of golf courses. They move stuff up, especially like on weekends, busy times. They make the course a lot shorter. And the shorter you get with the tee boxes, the more likely those tee boxes are going to be kind of around where they're supposed to be. Like, you know, a couple of courses that I play around me on a regular basis, there's, you know, one of them has 3 holes where they're par 4s and they're never on the back box, you know, except for like premier elite events. Like they never, and each one of those, it's up 30 to 40 yards. And differential does, okay, so I'm looking at the chat there. And so just by those 3 holes alone, the course is 120 yards shorter. And then when you factor in some of the other ones that they move up from these back tees, the courses are typically playing shorter than they actually are. So you're getting credit for playing a longer, more challenging course. Like the length of the course is a big factor in course rating. Like it's the thing that they start from. They start from how long is the golf course. And when you're playing it a lot shorter than what it's supposed to be, the course is a lot easier. And so like when I've looked at how people perform, you know, playing long tees versus short tees. And I mean, like how, if I were to look at myself over the course of a season or 2 seasons, and I look how I perform from the back tees versus the front tees, like my handicap goes up when I play the front tees and it goes down when I play the back tees. And I think this length of course is a huge factor. But overall, I think they do a pretty good job. I think it is tilted in favor a bit of higher handicap players in some respects. But I don't have a great answer as to how I would do it differently. I think what they have and the people that were behind it years ago, pretty smart people, and they came up with a pretty good system. And I think the biggest flaw in all of it is that you have people that are just kind of just dishonest about how they manage their handicap. If everybody was completely honest on their handicap, I think it would be less of an issue, but that's just unfortunately not the world we live in. Shop credit is a very powerful thing with some folks.
We need real-time CIA satellite tracking of all golfers in real time.
Yeah, definitely.
Should now rethink the prizes from being pro shop credit for Links Leagues. So I have a question that actually relates to this, Lou. So we run, we have a widely distributed membership, right? We're not a conventional club that has one course where you might have a member guest or a club championship. So we built a what we call Links Leagues, in which you can play anywhere at any time. You just have to log a certain minimum number of rounds in a certain time frame. And then we calculate a rolling differential based on slope and rating. And I won't go all into the details, although I would love to talk to you for 10 hours about that. But I think precisely my question is kind of in 2-part. The things that I think about a lot is I monitor the scores, and we've built a very sort of simple beginning model that looks at the scores and understands outliers and at least triggers probability around someone being dishonest, right? Because ultimately the most important thing is trust, especially when you're not all in the same, there's the famous videos of people putting in scores in a 18 handicap shooting a 73, and they were the team was 40 under for the weekend or whatever, and everyone's yelling at them. we don't have that because you're not actually seeing the people that you're playing with, right? So from a statistical standpoint, I think there's two things that I think about a lot in this model. One is luck, and then the other one is cheating, right? And so you kind of mentioned it earlier around pros and the factor that luck might play in a course setup like Troon based on conditions. I'm a big baseball statistics fan, so a lot of the things we talk about in baseball statistics are around like a pitcher's difference between like FIP and ERA and how that might contribute to outperforming that or underperforming that and what that might mean for the future. And actually, your results were like highly influenced by bad luck, or same thing with like batting average with balls in play, right? These are all things that baseball nerds try to like think about when it comes to predicting future performance based on like how much can we actually trust this result. uh, is there anything like that in the golf data where you could actually quantify luck and sort of be able to understand the role it plays in someone's performance?
Well, that would be hard to do. I think some of it might be getting a little bit easier, potentially in the future. Right now, when you look at data, all you see is where the ball started and where the ball finished. You don't know a whole lot more about that. You don't know the journey that it took to get there. So if somebody, just with an extreme example, blocks a driver off the face of the earth, it goes, deep into the trees, and then it somehow spits its way out and it ends up, in a decent spot. Like, we can't see that in the data. And boy, that happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was up, 12 different ways in some bets with my buddy, and like, he just pulled one off the face of the earth, and I was just already counting my money, and this thing like came from nowhere. Like, it was in the woods for like 8 seconds, and then it just spit out. I'm like, how does that even happen? Like, just that's fake. There's no way that's real. But it's back to the data. It's hard to know and quantify some of that stuff. But if you look at PGA Tour venues now, you'll see they have camera towers around the green, and there are cameras up in there. Who was it that had the ruling not too long ago? Was it Xander? I think it was Xander that was kind of off in the woods and he got relief. Yeah, they're capturing video on shots, and so, think of it in context of like the Masters app. So the Masters captures it pretty much every shot, and you're able to see and quantify what happened a little bit better with the shot beyond where it started and where it finished. And I think you'd be able to eventually back your way into some of that stuff. And do I think it maybe evens out over the course of a year? It might, but sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes maybe someone ends up on the short end of the stick a little bit, and luck plays a factor, and sort of, the timing of the luck can play a big factor as well too. Like, when you're in contention, there's a lot of money on the line, and there's some big differences between, certain positions when you get higher up. And, it doesn't really matter if you finish 59th or 58th, like, it doesn't really matter. But if you finish fourth versus third, like, there's some money difference there. And so that kind of the timing of when some of those bad luck and good luck things happen, contingent upon where you are on the leaderboard, can have an impact if you're a pro. Like, the same thing potentially can happen to us, depending. But it's really hard to quantify some of that stuff. We remember some of the things that really stand out, but I wish there was a better way to quantify that. Like, I'd love to, again, I don't have necessarily the answer for this, but I'd love to see more like a dynamic course rating, a dynamic slope rating based on conditions, based on what's going on. We have PCC, but PCC, the adjustments that they make doesn't always work, and it doesn't necessarily go in the direction of the course played easier. Like, especially like if the tees are way up, like, I'd want to know that. I'd want to know that the tees were way up, and the 6,700 yard course played 6,500. Like, that's a huge difference, and that rating is off by more than a shot, with that kind of a difference. And so I'd love to see them move to dynamic course and slope rating based on conditions, based on wind, based on turf conditions. There's a lot of factors in play. The course is different every time you show up. It's never the same, and sometimes it plays really easy, sometimes it plays really hard, sometimes the pins are set incredibly challenging, sometimes they're not. PCC doesn't always do a good job of capturing when it's when conditions are challenging. Like here's an extreme example. A couple years ago, a couple of guys I know, they were gonna go play, and one guy was in town, and they were gonna play at this really nice club, and it was a monsoon. It was like 55 degrees. It was raining. It was windy, and it was miserable. And they were literally the only two people that played that day. No other rounds on the golf course. And there was no PCC because in order for PCC to trigger, you need a certain number of rounds. And like the one guy, he's a scratch player, and he went out and shot like 87 in these horrific conditions. Like it was just awful. And the other guy, shot like 95. He's like a 6 or a 7. And like that 87 was probably unbelievable for the day and the conditions, like just off the charts, really good. But we'll never know. And I don't necessarily have an answer on how to get to dynamic ratings and differentials, but it would certainly help some things out.
Great. Yeah, and I actually like the fact that there isn't an answer for it, because I think it's an interesting. Not that my question was interesting, but like it's an interesting problem, right? Because it like affects
Sure.
all sport. It affects all sports, like the rub of the
Yeah.
green, the bounce of the ball, like all of these things factor in so much. And I think what gets me really excited about what you're doing, what other people are doing, is that all the things that you've talked about today are things that we had absolutely no idea about with any kind of like rigor decade ago, right? But
Sure.
now we know
Yeah.
those things, and it leaves time for us to solve the smaller problems, right? And I think that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, definitely.
So my second question then is, one of the things that there's kind of a couple things that we're constantly trying to do when it comes to the competition. One is like red hatting it and like going through these thought exercises of trying to cheat in our brains of like, how would I try to manipulate this competition in order for it to fall in my favor? And then we can detect the kind of known vectors for cheating, right? Like we know certain ways that if this sort of flag was flipped or we saw a probability in this direction, then we know that we're going to investigate that more, right? Like golf's a game of integrity, but we still kind of want these checks and balances.
Sure.
Are there any other things? I think probably a lot of the internet discourse, especially after the tweet yesterday with the Barstool guys, and is probably a lot of that is around sandbagging, right? Like, and that's like one cheating direction. But in the other direction too, obviously, there's people who are whatever you call the opposite of sandbagging. I don't know.
Hollywood vanity caps.
Yeah, vanity cap. There you go. So vanity handicap. In kind of general, how do you think about cheating from a statistical perspective? The fingerprints of cheating that you would see in a player's history or rounds posted, and kind of specifically, either what are some examples that you've seen that were really clear to you? And I think the last question would be, there's this gray area between going from an accusation of cheating to then like a confirmation of cheating, right? So that's probably the hardest of those three questions, but just sort of like, what are the fingerprints of cheating that you see, and then just how do you think about cheating in general statistically?
Well, I mean, I would start with, if you take a lot of money off of me that day, then you're probably cheating. At least that's how I feel, and it helps me feel better at night. So,
Yes.
like that's where I would start with that. It's a hard one, right? Because it's so, we're supposed to, our intention should be to shoot the best score we possibly can, and it's really easy to not do that. It's really easy to miss a few putts, miss a few chips, add a shot here or there when it doesn't count. And if you want to do that, you're probably going to be able to get away with doing that. I haven't put a whole lot of thought and effort into how I would try to find and detect cheating, and what what fingerprint I would look for, and because I think no matter what you do, like if somebody wants to cheat, they're going to be able to cheat. And I think it's I would be lying if I said I haven't validated that some rounds were entered in, like in some tournaments, just to make sure that people are putting that stuff in, because I don't know that everybody enters all their scores. And so I've definitely seen situations where people, show up, play really well in a tournament, go net 7, 8 under, 9 under, whatever the case may be, and don't post that round. Like I've certainly seen those kind of situations before. And so I think that is, I wish there was a way where, your round, every round you played, had to be entered, like, and it would automatically happen. I don't know exactly how that would work, but I don't know if somebody really wants to cheat. I just don't know how you're going to ultimately catch them, because you could put as many controls in place as you want, and like if I want to cheat, I'm going to be able to cheat. Like I could open up my phone right now and I could enter a score from today, and I could enter a score from today at an away club or at a public golf course. If you're a private member, and would anybody really know? No, I play with my buddies, play with my work buddies. Like played horrible. I'm not sure how you can fully stop that. So unfortunately, I don't think there's a great answer.
Yeah, totally. And then kind of my last question is around this is probably maybe this is something that you've looked at, or maybe it's not, but do you find are you more dubious of rounds that are played alone versus played with other people? So what I mean is, like, kind of one of the classic jokes that I think Chris and I have said back and forth is like, we played together and man, I really played terrible. Man, when I play alone, I play so good. And so like the follow-up joke is, well, of course, because you're cheating, right? Do you notice any differences in rounds? And I guess this is also hard from a lot of your data sets because you don't actually know if people are playing by
No clue.
themselves or with a group,
Yeah.
right? But anything there, I just kind of shot in the dark if that exists anywhere.
No, I don't have any data on that. I don't know that anybody that does. The only way you'd ever be able to back into that is at a club level that had a tee sheet that knew what groups went out together and who went out by themselves, and you'd have to be pretty diligent about that. I know the place that I play, like I could show up at 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, Wednesday night. There's probably not going to be anyone there. Like I could go off the first tee, and like nobody in the pro shop would even know I'm in the building, that I'm even there, like that I'm even going out and playing to make sure that, oh, all right, Lou did post a score, but he played by himself. Like you can't do that. Like they'd have no idea. So,
right.
And I don't have any data on playing alone versus playing by yourself. But the example that you gave would be the opposite of what a sandbagger would do. Like you said, play by myself and I play better. Like a cheater wouldn't do that. A cheater would play by themselves and they would play a lot worse. So,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks for answering my questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Sweet. Got a couple questions from the community here. If you're in the audience, want to raise your hand, come up on stage. Feel free to come on up and ask Lou yourself. I know we had one from Wheeze earlier that was submitted. If you want to come on up.
A great name, by the way. Wheeze. I love that.
We've got young Wheeze.
Hey, Lou, can you hear me?
We gotcha. Yep.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So you can't use the sensors on the range. I was just wondering, is there anything like in the future, like maybe like a monitor that comes out that can hook into with the sensors they can use on the range, or like what? For me, like what would you recommend, like using data while on the range as well? Because I was on the range. I was on the range the other day and I saw this guy, like he was like unboxing his sensors, and I was like, hey man, like really cool. Like I have some too. I don't think you can use those on the range. And he was like, nah man, like I'm like, you can use them. And I was like, okay, yeah, like good luck. But yeah, just like, is there anything coming out in the future where you can track data with the sensors, or how would you do it when you're just on the range? And is there any data that you could get from that? Thanks.
Yeah. Good question. I think that what you're going to see in the future is, there's a lot of features that Arcos is working on. They're always making the product better. You'll start to see, integrations with other tools, like integrations with launch monitors. Being able to, I don't want to give away, like anything that they're working on specifically, and so like anything I say here, please don't, none of this means that this is not a feature that's coming out tomorrow. But as they move forward, they're thinking about things like this and being integrate practice data along with on-course data and doing other things with Arcos beyond just collecting on-course data. So there's a ton of stuff in the pipeline being planned, some being actively worked on. Like the vision over the next however long is incredible with all the things that they have coming out and that they're working on, that they're thinking about. I wish I could tell you about all of them because it's just some really, really cool stuff that they're, that is in the pipeline for them. And, I would tell you, like on the range, like you would want to be working on, things like you'd want to start to understand your dispersion. You want to start to understand your carry distances. And, there's some tools out there that are portable, that are easy to use, that are relatively cheap. Like Mevo is a really good one. Mevo from FlightScope. It's a tiny little launch monitor. It's legit like the size of my phone. And it's not that expensive. It's only like $300 or $400. It's not like you're going to hear the price tag and go, "Oh, that's crazy." But it does a really good job. It's small radar based, and it does a really good job at giving you some good numbers, carry numbers, like your dispersions, and that's the kind of stuff that is really useful, like in a practice environment, to collect and keep and look at and know and understand. Like when our players at Princeton are practicing, a good chunk of the time, sometimes they're working on technical things on their swing, and they're working on certain positions, they're working on certain movements, they're trying to get certain feels. But when we go to performance-based drills, like almost every one that they do, I'm kind of thinking of them on the fly. Almost every one that they do, they have a TrackMan or a GC Quad with them, so that they can get some of these numbers and use that. So if you're really, if you're serious, where you're to the point where you're asking questions about those types of things, I would encourage you to look at something like a FlightScope Mevo. Like that's a good inexpensive option. That Garmin has the R10. I think that's about $600 or $700, somewhere in there. It's another decent lower priced option. Rapsodo has a pretty good one, again around $600, that works pretty well outdoors. Like those are some really good options on things that I would be incorporating into my game on the range, on the practice facility. And the cool part about some of those is, if you have room in your garage, you can get a net and you can use that stuff. Sort of, during the off season, like if you have an off season where you happen to live. And if I say FlightScope one more time, Bubba gets paid. I love that. That's some good comments there.
Awesome. Thank you, Lou.
Sweet. Anyone else want to raise their hand? Come on up. I've got one for you, Lou. Wanted to say, again, thanks so much for being here. Do you have any questions for us? What do you know about Links Golf Club? Is there anything we can, answer for you about Links, about the community? What we're doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get the elevator pitch, because I honestly I don't know all that much. I think at a high level, collectively, like people bought in, and you guys used that money to buy a golf club, and now there's a bunch of owners of a golf club. But again, I'm not fully versed on all that you're doing, how you did it, and what you're doing next. And I know with some of the the questions you talked about, I was half paying attention to the chat. I know there was a bunch of questions that came through chat. So if folks put something in the chat and they want to ask that question, feel free to either put it in chat again, and I'll answer it as I see it, or click the button and they can bring you up and you can just ask me directly. But back to your question, like I'd love the 30-second overview on exactly what it is, because I don't know that I totally know.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Chris, you want to take this one?
I was expecting you to take it, but
I got it.
I'm
Yeah.
happy
Sure. So basically, you're right. We started 2.5 years ago, originally on a mission to purchase our own golf course. We accomplished that mission last year when we bought Spey Bay in Scotland. In the meantime, in between there, we've partnered with 70 different golf organizations from Callaway, Bridgestone, Cobra, Puma, Arcos, 5 Iron, a lot of really great partners across the board for folks who want to get new clubs, gear, clothes, lessons, improve their game, fittings, all of that. And kind of assembled a massive online golf community here with some great folks, including the ones here in the audience today. And I know folks will be listening in on Twitter and afterwards on the recording. But we're currently in search of our first US course, right? We've had votes. So the community has the opportunity to vote on various things. So they've had the votes on a Midwest course and a Southeast course, which we're in talks with to become the first US course for Links members. And you can join either by purchasing our membership NFT or by joining with an annual subscription, right? Which gives you access to additionally 400 plus golf courses, course networks here in the US. So, you get course access, benefits, and an awesome community of golfers. We do lots of events. As well as special ones over at our course in Scotland. But really, this community is super excited as well about our first US course, which should be happening this year.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And if you're hiring an official statistician for the group, just let me know. I might know a guy.
Sounds great. You might have some competition from Langlanet here, one of our stats guys, but I'm sure he was very excited to hear a lot of what you had to share with us today. We've got a question here from a proxy. Are you a gambler on sports, on golf specifically, and does the statistics help with that endeavor?
No, I don't. I'm not a gambler, unfortunately. I will play for a few bucks with my buddies on the weekend, but I'm not a sports gambler. I've never been a sports gambler. Just never, something I never got into. Never spent any real time. I know some really smart people that are doing some really cool stuff with it. So it's just a stone I've never turned over. And with respect to PGA Tour, I've signed every year when you kind of do your shot link agreement, you have to sign something that says you're not going to gamble. And so, technically you're not, if you're doing any kind of work for someone or you're a player, you're not allowed to gamble. So it was easy for me because I'm not a gambler in any sport. I don't really follow sports all that much, to be honest. Little bit of football, obviously follow golf, but like if you asked me to name 10 basketball players, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be able to. Like currently playing right now, I don't think there's a chance. Probably same thing with baseball. I don't know if I could name 10 baseball players, to be honest. Just I've never been a big sports fan guy.
True. Well, I wanted to ask one other question. Do you know anything, or you think there will be tracking technology in tour quality golf balls at any time in the future?
That's a really good question. I know that there's a company actually based out of Buffalo, Encore. I know that they had announced in the past that they were working on, I forget what they called it, Smart Ball, maybe that's what it was. But they were working on putting technology inside of a golf ball. I don't know if it's going to be meant for practice. I don't know if it's going to be meant for on course. Like I'm sure if you would have, go back to 1850 and when they were making their own featheries and you were to tell them about a modern golf ball, like I don't know that someone making a feathery would have been able to envision a modern golf ball and like how it performs and what it does and what you can do with it. So, 20 years from now, could they have a chip that goes in the core of a golf ball? Yeah, I mean, they very well could. A couple of weeks ago, I got to go to San Diego and I went to TPI headquarters to do a fitting and got to do a TPI assessment. But part of what I saw there was the manufacturing facility for Titleist and the R&D facility for Titleist. and I got to go inside the R&D facility and see what's going on there and talk to a few people. Like I can't give you any. I can talk to you about everything else. I can't talk to you about the R&D stuff and like what I saw. But I'll just say that like they have some incredibly brilliant people doing some incredibly brilliant things. And so like where it all goes 5, 10, 20 years from now, like, sky's the limit, I would say.
Cool. And last one that I've seen in chat, probably been asked this 100 times. Do you have any specific thoughts on the USGA golf ball rollback plan?
Do we have another 3 hours? Like how much time do we have? Yeah, this is something that I've definitely talked about at length on my podcast, on social media. When they did the announcement, the tail end of last year, beginning of this year, whenever it was, I was on a number of different podcasts talking about it. I'm not a proponent of the rollback. I've always been against the rollback, and I think that in my opinion. And in my opinion, golf has always changed. And like if we're going to be arbitrary about what we think it should be, like, I could go, if someone says I want it to be, 1985 based technology. Well, if we could, if we had a time machine, we could go back to like 1890 and find, a lot of people in 1890 that would say like what you have in 1985 is ridiculous and it's it's unneeded. So like any kind of line in the sand you draw is pretty arbitrary. And if you look at there was definitely an uptick in distance after the Pro V1 kind of came into play and everyone adopted it. But since then, it's been a very, very gradual uptick in how far they're hitting the golf ball. And the thing that I don't think that they're really thinking of, and Sasha McKenzie is the first one to kind of talk about this. If you don't know who Sasha is, he's a biomechanist, PhD, consults for a bunch of companies, inventor of the Stacks, or co-inventor of the Stack system. Really, really smart guy, legit one of the smartest guys in golf. And he brought up the point that right now dispersion is essentially a function of how far the ball is going, right? So think of golf as kind of a triangle. Like you start down here at the tee and it's a triangle and you hit it somewhere in this triangle. And right now, like how far they're hitting the golf ball is or how wide their dispersion is just kind of a function of how far they're hitting the golf ball. And you don't see many long drivers. There's lots of guys on the planet that can, get 210 ball speed, 220 ball speed. They're not on tour, because 220 ball speed isn't effective. It's all over the map. Like you can't keep that on the planet because again, it's a triangle, and the farther down it goes, that triangle, the wider the dispersion gets. And so what's going to happen is there's a lot of guys right now that either have a lot in the tank and are not swinging extremely hard, and they have a lot more ability to swing faster. They're just not doing it because they're already cruising at 118, 119, 120, 121. They could cruise at 124, 125, but the dispersion gets too wide to make it playable, so they just throttle it back a little bit. And so you're going to have guys that are just not swinging that as fast as they can. You're going to have some guys, when the rollback goes into place, that will prepare for it. They'll work out more, they'll speed train more, they'll add speed. And what's going to happen is, if you think of it again from the triangle, if you take everybody and take the average distance on tour from 300 yards down to 285, right? We're not going as far up that leg of the triangle. And so dispersion is going to get smaller, like it's going to get tighter. And if the average swing speed on tour right now is 115, 116, somewhere in that range, when they roll it back 15 yards, they're going to be able to swing faster. Like right now, the average club head speed is about 115, 116 on tour. If today, with today's golf ball, we turn that into 121, that would be really challenging because as a group, dispersion would get too wide and people would start to fall off and they wouldn't stay on tour, because it's when you're hitting a lot of balls way out here, way off to the side, it's tough to keep your card and stay on tour. But when you make everybody shorter, you're going to be able to quickly go from swinging 115, 116 as a tour average to 120, 121, 122. Like that'll be tour average, and they will regain a lot of the distance that they lost, like almost overnight. Like that was what Sasho, his prediction was. And as I thought about it, I think he's absolutely spot on. Like these guys will prepare for it. They know how important distance is. They're playing for a lot of money, not only a lot of money on the events that they play in and the money they can win on tour, but all of that, all of those accolades with playing well on tour and being, you know, top 10, top 5 player in the world comes with lots of sponsor dollars. So there's a lot of money that are available to these guys, and they're going to do everything they can to maximize that. So, like, I think at the tour level, the rollback is going to be, I think Sasha's right. And whatever distance they lose on day one, they're going to kind of gain back really, really quickly. And then you're going to just have amateurs that are impacted. And, you know, there's a lot of talk out there about what the impact of that is going to be. You know, the USGA has actually done some studies on that. They've released some papers on some different balls that they've tested it out. And like, we won't know until we know, but I think the impact is going to be bigger than what they're telling us based on their own data and some of the studies that they've run with limited flight golf balls. It's a complex problem to to solve. And you know, I could go on for hours on this, and if someone wants to ask some follow-ups, you know, feel free. But I think it's, you know, it's a bad idea for pros. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a horrible idea for amateurs. Like, amateurs need more distance, not less. Like, they shouldn't be touching at all what amateurs did. And the way the whole thing unfolded, if you think about it, they first kind of came out and they said, hey, like, we're thinking about the rollback. Like, what do you think? Like, and they wanted comments. And the comments from stakeholders was, no, we don't really want to roll back at all. And then they came back and said, well, you know what? How about we just roll it back for the pros and we leave it alone for the amateurs? We just make like a tour ball. And the stakeholders collectively said, nope, don't want to do that. And then the USGA said, well, you know what? We're going to do it for everybody. So they kind of, I kind of give the analogy, and it may be unfair. Some people may push back on this, but like, they kind of gave you the option of, like, you know, I'm gonna punch you in the face, or I'm gonna, you know, maybe, you know, kick you in the stomach. You know, which one do you want? Well, I don't want either one. And then they said, well, all right, we're just going to punch you in the face. And you're like, no, don't want that. And then they're like, well, like, we gave you the option to only get punched in the face and you didn't want it. So we're going to punch you in the face and we're going to kick you in the stomach. And that's kind of, in my mind, like, kind of what happened and how it played out. And I just think it's a colossal mistake. And I think so much of it is around, like, protecting golf courses. I don't know what we're protecting it from. But again, I could talk about this topic for hours, but I'm gonna stop my rambling.
Appreciate your candor there, and that analogy, I think, was quite apt. That was great. Yeah, thanks, a proxy, for the question. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And Lou, thank you so much for your time this evening. I know I said, you know, maybe about 30 minutes, and you said if we go 90, an hour and a half, that's great too.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate your time here. This has been awesome getting to hear from you, learn from you. Greg, Chris, anything else you have this evening?
Yeah, I look forward to having you back next week. I'll do another hour and a half. And thank you so much, Lou.
Yeah, it was fun. Again, like, if you want to keep going, if people have questions that didn't get answered, I'm happy to answer them. I enjoyed, you know, spending the time here. So, you know, no worries at all. And I'd love to come back at some point, and love to get out for one of your events at some point. And are you allowed to say, like, where your U.S. course is going to be, or you don't know that yet?
Very soon. That's actually something we discuss
Okay.
on these calls. And Lou,
Uh,
now that you're in the Discord, I can tell you when people have questions or debates about golf stats, they'll just tag you, right? And you can ignore them or come in and join the conversation. But we're actually going to jump from here and recap. We scouted a golf course this week in Erie, Pennsylvania, Erie
Oh,
GC that
okay.
was up for sale.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you're more than welcome to stick around. We're going to drop a video and a poll in our members chat. Happy to give you a peek at that. And we're going to have a little bit of a debate about whether or not to vote on it more holistically. But yeah, it's one of the fun things that we do here. Of course, love to have you in the chats or have you back for one of these calls anytime you're free.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm curious as to what it is. I grew up in Buffalo, New York. Erie's only about a 90-minute drive away, and I've made that trip down Interstate 90 to Erie more than once to play some golf down there. So I'm interested to see which course it's going to be. Chance I've probably played it in the past, but congrats on that, and look forward to learning a bit more.
Yeah. So this is Erie GC. This is not one of our primary options. This is a community-led option that we sent out a scouting crew, a group of Links members, including myself, drove out from Philadelphia on Monday and Tuesday to play Erie GC, Erie Golf Club. It's a Tillinghast design from 1921. It's been modified a bit over the years. And we also played Whispering Woods as a little bit of a comparison. Are you familiar with either of those?
No, I am not.
Okay. Well, Erie GC, had kind of an unimpressive clubhouse. We went out, myself, B Games, and Danny from CoinDesk. We went out and we played. Got a tee time there. It was a fun course. I shot even par on the front, and all of that was on
Nice.
camera, Lou. So you know I'm not faking it here. Mr. Senor can
Awesome.
check it when I post my score, but we have
It was
verification.
AI generated. I still don't believe you.
That's right. So we had interesting time on the course. There's some really cool holes, especially on the front. The back, the layout was a little bit disjointed, in my opinion. It was kind of like a couple of 2-hole loops and sections that brought you back, and you had to go through the parking lot. But we stopped at 9 and had lunch in the clubhouse, talked to a few of the locals, including the bartender, some of the guys who were involved in and close with the current leasee. So the situation is, it was on a 5-year lease. The current leasee owns all of the equipment on site: mowers, tractors, greens equipment, all of the golf carts as well, and then all of the accoutrement like grills and everything in the clubhouse. So he intends to make a bid for the course, and then if he doesn't win, right, he'll be selling or wanting to sell all of that equipment to the person who does win. So that asking price of 1.1 million, pretty, feasible, right? As an
Yeah.
asking price, it's probably going to come in as a bit more expensive, right? Probably the estimates we heard from folks were closer to 2 million. So, and that's before you get started on any of removing the trees or kind of restoring the original Tillinghast, because it has been modified pretty heavily.
Yeah, that's really cool. So probably too specific of a question. Is everybody an equal owner, or are there some people that own more than others? How's that work?
So the way it works is the NFT membership doesn't give you ownership rights or equity, right? It is a membership that you own. So you buy it once, you can hold it, you can sell it. It's different from your traditional club membership in the way that you can sell your membership if you choose to leave the club. But as long as you hold it, you have membership benefits, right? So that's a pretty cool aspect of Links membership. It doesn't give you ownership rights in the course, but it does give you voting rights, right? So you have the ability to vote on you have the ability to vote on things like, which course should we buy, right? What should the club rules be? What should the culture be? We actually voted on the logo for Spay Bay, right? So we commissioned artists to work on a variety of options, and then we voted on that together. So we have different committees and groups of members that work on what the club is and isn't. And it's a really cool kind of democratic process, but it's not
That's really cool.
security, right?
Got it. That's really that's pretty cool. I see we had a question here from Hank that came in. What are my thoughts on Willowbrook Golf Club? I used to play Willowbrook. It's I was a member at a golf club. They've since changed the name. It was called Tantera back in the day, and I think it's called Pendleton something or other now. I forget, but we used to play a Ryder Cup, Tantera against Willowbrook. It was called the Cider Cup. So I used to play at Willowbrook every year. We'd play, one day there, one day at the other one. So it's a cool place. I enjoyed there, and I have a lot of good memories at that place with the event that we used to play there. Thanks for the question, Hank.
Mr. Senior, I know you're planning a trip to Buffalo here and pretty soon. Lou, do you have any favorite courses in that area?
Country Club of Buffalo. I worked there, caddied there as a kid. Used to play there every Monday. Awesome place. Donald Ross course. The 6th hole at the Country Club of Buffalo. The Pulpit is the official name. Everyone called it the Volcano Hole. Kind of built in the quarry, and this literal kind of volcano is the green complex. And Google 6th hole Country Club of Buffalo and take a look at some of the pictures, and you're going to be like, wow, that's wild. Fried Egg, he did an article on it and said it's the best par 3 in the country that you've never heard of, and it's really cool. It's just such a memorable hole. Course was always in phenomenal shape. Definitely my favorite. Some other ones that Craigburn is fantastic. Really enjoyed playing Craigburn, a really good one. Always enjoyed Transit Valley, Brookfield. Those were good ones to play. Park was always fun. When I was really young, I used to play a lot at Grover Cleveland when I was just starting out, and that place, I have a soft spot in my heart for that place.
OG
Home of the
Country Club of Buffalo, yeah.
Yeah, home of the 1912 U.S. Open, won by Johnny McDermott. First time anyone's ever finished a U.S. Open under par collectively for all 4 rounds. Little known fact right there. But yeah, Buffalo's got some great golf courses in and around the area.
Yeah, I would love. I was born in Waynesville, and my brother went to Waynesville South, which, as you know, is just around the corner.
Yeah,
And
Billy's, right?
Yeah,
Billy's.
yeah, exactly, the Billies.
Billy's.
My first football game I ever attended was probably there. But yeah, Country Club of Buffalo is right around the corner, and so I've been trying to figure out how to play there, just because he drove by it all the time as a kid and everything. So I really want to play Grover Cleveland, mostly because of that history you mentioned. I know I've talked to people who play it now, and it's it's not great to keep up, but I'm a big history guy, and I would have fun playing it just for the idea of playing it, even more so than playing the course. So, but I wrote down the rest of those, and I'm gonna look at them.
Yeah, Grover Cleveland. It's a fun little course. It's a muni. It's a fun little track. It's got some history. It's different than it was. There's a hospital right next to it, Veterans Hospital right next to it, and they built that, and they whacked out a huge part of the golf course to build that hospital there. So it's not the same as it was. And I want to say what is it? It's 8 or 9. I forget the number. It's right along Main Street there. It was at the time, and it may still be. It was the longest par. It was the only par 6 in U.S. Open history. Something about that hole. I forget exactly what it was, but it's a fun little muni. A couple of the holes are interesting and fun to play, but it's probably not going to be in the same shape as the Country Club of Buffalo over in Williamsville. I'll just say that. One of my favorite stories from there, I was a kid, and just to give you an idea of the kind of golf course that it was. So I'll just say there was someone there that was preparing to go on a trip to Myrtle Beach, and they wanted to work on their tan, and they were legitimately playing barefoot with no shirt on. And the dude from the grounds crew came barreling down the golf course at 40 miles an hour in a pickup truck in the center of the fairway. Pulled up, and he's like, man, come on, you got to put your shirt on. You can't be out here without a shirt. And guy put his shirt on for, I don't know, 15 minutes, and then took his shirt off and played barefoot without a shirt so he could work on his tan. So it's definitely, some of my best memories are at that place. I was young, really young, no money at all. And a season pass back then was $98 for somebody my age. Like, so it was all the golf I could play for $98, which was a fortune when I was, 14 or whatever I was. But I have some of my favorite memories in golf are at that place because I was there with my buddies having a good time.
Yeah, that's great. You might have just pushed me over the line to play it. That's another good reason to do it. I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, go check it
I
out.
think we all have those places that we grew up playing, and they hold a very special place in our heart. Right?
Yeah, that and Delaware Park as well. The golf course at Delaware Park, if you've ever played that one. Good one. Sorry, we're turning this into a talk about Buffalo golf courses.
Yeah, welcome to our Buffalo podcast. Like and subscribe, please. Yeah, I appreciate it, though. I'm going to check these places out.
Yeah, and if you have an issue getting out at CCB, let me know. I definitely have some folks I could probably connect you with to help you get out there.
Cool. Well, that's very nice of you, and I will absolutely send you a DM in that direction.
Yeah, please do. Depending on when you're going to be there, like maybe I could coordinate it and we could play together.
Be awesome. I don't know well, the good news is you can look at my Arcos profile and you can see. So it won't be a surprise how badly I played when we play.
I play with everybody. I don't care whether you shoot 60 or whether you shoot 160. It doesn't matter to me.
For sure. That's the way to be.
Mr. Senor, didn't you just recently join the Sevenwood Mafia? Is that
for sure? The Heavenwood.
Let's go.
So I will tell you, Lou, as someone who loves head covers, just in general, and like wanting my golf bag to look cool, the primary reason because I wanted a fourth head cover. But the second that I hit it, it made sense. Everything that you tweeted, I know you said you're now almost either you already have or you're looking for a 9-wood, which maybe I'm going in that direction too. But it's unbelievable, like the spin profile and the descent angle on that club, and how it just is so easy to hit. Like it's such a great club. I love it.
Yeah, I really I do have the 9-wood. I've had the 9-wood in the bag now for a year. Got it a little over a year ago. Didn't really get to use it last year with missing most of the season, but yeah, it's fantastic. They're both awesome. I was just fit for a new 7-wood, and already have it, and it's fantastic. So it's a good club. It's one of those clubs where I think people should try it. It replaced hybrids for me, and I struggled with, and I think some people struggle with hybrids, like hitting them left. Like I constantly was hitting hybrid left. All of my misses were left, and they were pretty severe left with hybrids, and that's why I gave 7-wood a try, because of that issue with the hybrids. And I think I'm not really an equipment junkie, which you may or may not be surprised by that, but from what a few equipment junkies have told me, like that's pretty common for some people with hybrids. The lie angles are a little more upright, and a lot of people struggle with the lefts with hybrids, and depending on how you swing the club. And that went away for me when I switched to the 7-wood, and then I kind of switched over to the 9-wood to replace the 5-iron. I was never not a good iron player by any stretch, and getting the 5-iron out of my bag in place of 9-wood made a huge difference for me. Like I'm really comfortable with that club in all situations. So if you haven't tried it, I'd say give it a shot.
100% co-sign that. I feel like a different player with a 7-wood in my arsenal.
Yeah, a proxy. The hybrid hooks are real. Like for some of us, they are. And mine went away with the 7-wood. So give it a shot.
I'm gonna have to try one out for sure. I think
you'll still hit 240, so it's fine. I mean, and you'll still probably slice it, probably too, if you don't slow down.
Probably will swing too hard and too fast with it. That and the 2-iron, the driving iron that we played with in Scotland, I think was just game changing. Yeah,
it's helpful on 100 holes.
Yeah, Lou, do you have any Arcos data? Mr. Senor and I played when we walked 100 holes on the summer solstice at Spey Bay, of course, in Scotland.
Wow.
We did just over 28 miles, 63,000 steps. Is there any data in Arcos of the most rounds or shots played in a single day that you have access to, that you could say definitively we hold the record, or what place we're in on the record book?
Yeah, I'd be able to look that up. I would be shocked if that's not the most number of holes played. I'd be surprised. Like I know some people do, those marathon challenges to raise money for charities, whatever the case may be, but I'm guessing not all of them are logging stats. So I'd be surprised if it wasn't at the very top or, top 10 of all time. That's a lot of steps.
Yeah.
Like doing that many holes in one day, walking, like I would have to prepare for that for months. I would have
We
to
did.
prepare for months for that. Like
Lou,
that's a lot.
There's a video of me recreating shot for shot the Rocky training montage, which Mr. Signor edited. I live in Philly, so I ran up the Rocky steps, ran through the Italian market with my golf bag on, wearing my cleats. So
Nice.
there was some preparation for it, but Mr. Signor also trained very hard. We did it together, and I used Arcos for yardages the entire time. I don't think I tracked every single shot and I didn't go back in and do it, but at least 4.5 of the 5 rounds, my phone battery and watch battery were alive for. So they should be tracked in there.
Yeah, that's
The link for
that's
actually holding
fun.
up for the entire day, though. Like that's what's helpful about the link is the battery lasted. Like our phones died, our watches died. But
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. That's so much. Like for Princeton, in college events, many college events are practice run on Sunday, 36 holes on Monday, and then 18 holes on Tuesday morning. Practice round is usually, in the evening on Sunday, and it's a long, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It's extremely long, and you're exhausted by the time you get back on Tuesday night. And you typically walk I'll walk 30, 32, 33,000 steps on Monday, and about that much on Sunday and Tuesday combined. So like over the course of a 48-hour stretch where I get to sleep on Sunday night and then get to sleep on Tuesday night, I walk 65,000 steps ish, and I'm exhausted on Tuesday night. I can't imagine doing that all in one day. Like I don't know that I would make it. It's tough enough to do that condensed stuff for college. That would be tough. So hats off just for finishing.
Yeah, we did 212 holes in 4 days around that. So that was,
Crazy.
Yeah, 36 the day before, 24 the day after. Yeah, it was really fun. We should definitely do it for charity next year, or have a reason to do it other than just randomly deciding to. But yeah, it was definitely a cool way to celebrate the solstice up there. 19 hours of
Cool.
daylight. We teed off at 4:45 a.m. Yeah, good time.
Amazing. That's great. I would say I would join you next year, but nope, I'm not going to join you for that.
everyone else just played 72, so you could hit that mark.
Like 36 is kind of my limit. Like I'd be tapping out. I used to do 54, walking at Country Club of Buffalo when I worked there on Mondays, but I'm not young anymore. 54 walking in one day would be tough. So I'll stick to 36. That'll be good.
Sounds good. Yeah, you're welcome to come out. Let us know when you want to come out to Scotland. We'll do that there. Yeah. Don't want to take up too much more of your time here this evening, Lou. Folks in chat, if you have any other questions, you feel free to tag Lou in the Discord now that he's here, or shoot him a DM on Twitter. Lou, if you want to run back, we dropped your newsletter link in the chat at the beginning. Any of your links, where to find you across social media or on the internet.
Yeah, best place is just on X. You may know it as Twitter, just at Lou Stagner there. Or you can just find me at loustagnergolf.com and sign up for my newsletter. I send out a weekly newsletter with lots of cool, nerdy golf math. And if that's your thing, then it's a good thing for you to read every week. And I appreciate the time today. It was great to chat with you guys. It was really cool to learn a little bit more about the specifics about what you do and kind of what you're doing next. And I'd love to continue to kind of be a part of the community and figure out how to get involved in some of the things that you're doing. So again, thanks for your time today.
Yeah,
cheers,
super
Lou.
grateful, Lou. Thanks a lot. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, you as well. And thanks for everyone that hung out this whole time. Thanks so much. Appreciate all the questions and for everyone sticking around. So thanks very much.
Talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
All right, thanks, guys. Take care. Bye.